Bob Dylan is often cited as one of the greatest American songwriters in history. The beginnings of his musical career can largely be traced to 1961, when he moved to Greenwich Village in New York at just 20 years old. The following year, he released his first album of mostly covers. Between the years 1963 and 1964, Dylan became a singular force in political folk music, performing at the March on Washington and receiving titles such as the Voice of a Generation. Famously, Dylan refused this acclaim by going electric at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965, alienating himself from the folk revival scene. For the next year, he remained on a wild and tumultuous tour with the group later known as the Band, before disappearing near Woodstock, New York, to pursue a quieter life with his family. Again, Dylan changed genres, going from a rough rock style to recording more country-inspired music, notably collaborating with Johnny Cash in the late 60s. By 1974, Dylan would begin touring once again to mostly ecstatic reception, with the Rolling Thunder Revue producing some of his best live material. To the surprise of almost everyone, Dylan shifted to a gospel sound and proclaimed the Word of God as a born-again Christian in the late 1970s and early 80s. During this time, he released 3 definitively Christian albums before leaving the faith. All of this brings us to his 22nd studio album, Infidels, released in 1983. Studio sessions yielded many stellar tracks that made their way onto the official release, and one unreleased track in particular that is an all-time standout from his catalog of over 500 songs. This song, titled Blind Willie McTell, was included on the bootleg series 1-3 in 1991, and is a stark and dreary exploration of America's original sin, providing a unique reflection on the nation's troubling history regarding slavery. Many consider it to be an unparalleled masterpiece of his back catalog. The title, of course, is in reference to the Piedmont blues musician most known for his output in the 1920s and 30s. The melody of the track is undoubtedly an adaptation of the jazz standard St. James Infirmary Blues, made popular by artists like Cab Calloway and Louis Armstrong. Here's the 1928 recording by Louis Armstrong and his orchestra. Now here's Dylan's version with Mark Knopfler on guitar. The first verse goes as follows. Seen the arrow on the doorpost, saying this land is condemned, all the way from New Orleans to Jerusalem. I traveled through East Texas, where many martyrs fell, and I know no one can sing the blues like Blind Willie McTell. The importance of a doorpost has biblical significance, specifically in the context of Passover, but these first couple lines may be referential to the history of condemning land after the Civil War. Another possible interpretation that is much more general is that Dylan is speaking of America's regrettable practices involving enslavement and believes the nation is condemned in a spiritual sense. Jerusalem is brought up, which could either refer to the Holy City or to the formerly named Jerusalem, Virginia, where Nat Turner, a slave revolt leader, was executed in 1831. East Texas was the site of the Slocum Massacre in 1910, where white mobs violently murdered many black residents. These glimpses into intense racial violence and spiritual judgment introduce the listener slowly into Dylan's portrayal of America's past, all culminating in the refrain, "No one can sing the blues like Blind Willie McTell." The second verse starts, "Well, I heard that hoot owl singing as they were taking down the tents. The stars above the barren trees was his only audience. Them charcoal maidens can strut their feathers well, but nobody can sing the blues like Blind Willie McTell." These lines might have the most correlation with McTell himself, portrayed as a hoot owl who never got the recognition he deserved. It was very common for racist groups and individuals to attempt to ruin black performers' venues by tearing down tents and other things. Charcoal was often used in minstrel shows to paint performers' faces black and portray black individuals in explicitly negative ways. This verse highlights what it means for the music of black artists to endure in the Jim Crow South past Reconstruction. While faced with all the challenges a performer could encounter, many, like McTell, were able to create masterful new expressions in the South and beyond. Verse 3 goes, "See them big plantations burning, hear the cracking of the whips. Smell that sweet magnolia bloomin', see the ghosts of slavery ships. I can hear them tribes moanin', hear that undertaker's bell. Nobody can sing the blues like blind Willie McTell." Put very straightforwardly in this verse, Dylan aims to show that the plight of black Americans is still ongoing, even though slavery has ended in America for many years now. Racism as an institution has rooted itself into American life, and the prevalent remnants of a bleaker time still haunt the United States. It specifically calls to mind the transatlantic slave trade, with imagery related to ships and tribes. The next verse goes as follows. "There's a woman by the river, with some fine young handsome man. He's dressed up like a squire, bootlegged whiskey in his hand. There's a chain gang on the highway, I can hear them rebels yell, and I know no one can sing the blues like blind Willie McTell." The river mentioned in this verse is likely the Mississippi, the largest in the South and often referred to as the home of the blues. Chain gangs were prisoner groups that provided free labor and were a method to perpetuate black enslavement past emancipation. The last verse goes, "Well, God is in his heaven, and we all want what's his. But power and greed and corruptible seed seem to be all that there is. I'm gazing out the window of the St. James Hotel, and I know no one can sing the blues like blind Willie McTell." This song, through all its lines, creates a stunningly sobering view of a nation's history of racism and exploitation, culminating in a puzzlingly simple yet profound spiritual conclusion.